Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the sit down. Today's episode is about as is versus waiving a home inspection. Now, this episode is specifically for somebody who is currently on the market for a house. You are in the process of making offers. Now, if this is you, please stay tuned to this episode because this is very important. And if you can, like this video, comment below, and please share if you can. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer, I want to bring this to your attention. Now, to be competitive in this market, a lot of people are going to advise you to waive a home inspection, waive radon, different types of inspections that ultimately make your offer more competitive. Now, I will tell you this, it's always a good idea to have a home inspection, but understand that there are levels of competitiveness with regards to being in a competitive market. Now, one thing I do want you to note is that just because you waived a home inspection does not mean that the property is considered as is condition. If a property is completely, and you're using a regular standard, basically real estate contract, it doesn't mean, there's a difference between waiving a home inspection and as is. Now, there are stipulations where property is as is, and typically it's bank-owned property, foreclosures, different things like that. If the property is owned by a bank, oftentimes those are truly as is, but it has to be annotated in the contract. So in the contract, there's going to be a paragraph, and this goes for every state. Most contracts, I can't speak for all of them, are going to have a paragraph that says other contingencies. In other contingencies, you need to write the words, this property is considered as is. That would ultimately put you in an as-is condition, which means what you see is what you get. And that would have to be agreed upon and signed by both parties. Otherwise, there are certain things that need to happen. Basically, heat needs to be on, utilities need to be working, anything that was agreed to stay, stays, and there's a level of due diligence that needs to be done when this person gets into the property. You can't leave it like a mess and broom swept condition. Like, those are all things that are agreed upon in the contract that have to be met. So in an as-is condition property, fighting for credits is very difficult to do. Now, waiving a home inspection and fighting for credits is also hard to do, but it's not impossible. And that's the difference, is that you need to know when you're getting into a property that what you're agreeing to. And it's important to know that if you are waiving a home inspection, that still does not mean the property is as is, but it does mean that as far as bigger ticket items, you have less of a chance to get a credit for it, but that doesn't mean that you can't. Like, ultimately, if it's visible to everybody, everyone can see it, and it's an obvious discrepancy, you can bring that up and say, hey, what about this? In an as-is contract, you cannot. What you see is what you get. But in any deal, there's always a level of negotiation. So just keep that in mind. Now, when you're doing this, understand that if you're in a foreclosure, those are considered as is, unless you're financing. And while you're financing, and you can finance foreclosures, and that is a topic for another video. However, if you're financing a foreclosure and there are things that the lender needs repaired, those are something that the bank might be willing to give credit for in order to close. So keep that in mind when you're doing foreclosures or bank-owned property, court-owned properties. A lot of those are going to be considered as is and ultimately have a lot higher risk attached to them. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at these properties. And I will say this, as far as is versus waiving a home inspection, there is a difference. And make sure that if you are actually looking for as is, make sure that it says that in the contract. If it does not, you're not obligated to as is. You're just waiving the right to have a professional look at the property. That's all you're waiving. And that's ultimately, depending on the results of that inspection, would allow you to walk away from the deal. So keep that in mind. But if you are in the process of buying your first house, recognize that it is important to get a home inspection. You always should know what you're buying, but also recognize the fact that there is a competitiveness to offers. So recognize that too. A lot of times what people will do is maybe have an inspection, but make it necessarily not contingent upon, make it kind of, pass fail. In a sense, basically say it's a peace of mind inspection, something like that. And that can make you more competitive on your offers. If you've been in the market a long time, you need some tips, let me know. But there is a difference between the two. And if you have any questions, you need anything, please reach out to me. And as always, stay free.